Okay, let's just jump right into this explainer. You've probably seen that traditional road sign warning drivers about elderly people crossing, right? The one showing hunched figures heavily leaning on a cane? It's an image that's just deeply, deeply ingrained in our collective psyche. But now compare that to a modern symbolic representation of older adults actively lifting weights and stretching. The visual irony there is absolutely stark. So ask yourself, which of these symbols actually reflects reality? And maybe, more importantly, how do those outdated symbols completely shape our implicit biases about what it means to grow older? Because today, we are challenging those biases right from the start.
Welcome to today's explainer on the social aspects of aging and the life course. We've got a really fascinating goal today. We are going to completely shift our paradigm. We're moving away from viewing aging as just this series of inevitable biological declines. Instead, we're going to look at it as a dynamic, socially constructed journey. Because honestly, how society views age completely changes how we actually experience it.
So here's our agenda for today. First, we'll look beyond the biological clock. Second, we'll cover the social trends in aging. Third, we'll put on the sociological lens. Fourth, we'll compare cycle versus course. And finally, we'll dive into the life course approach.
All right, Section 1. Beyond the biological clock, redefining how we age. When most of us think about the aging process, we almost immediately jump to the biological stuff, right? The physical changes in our bodies. Or maybe the psychological side, like changes in mental capacity. But there is a third, absolutely crucial dimension here. The social dimension. This is all about our cultural norms, our values, and role expectations. As researchers Hockey and James put it, aging isn't simply organic maturation and decay. No way. The way these processes are understood differs entirely from culture to culture. And this matters so much in the real world. Like, when clinicians assess patients, they shouldn't just fall back on lazy assumptions like, well, this is just normal for a 70-year-old. Doing that completely ignores the massive social reality of that individual.
Moving right along to Section 2, Social Trends in Aging, a Changing Demographic Landscape.
16 million. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the massive demographic shift we are staring down. By the year 2037, the UK is projected to have 16 million people aged 67 and over. To really put that into perspective, back in 1951, there were only 5 million people of pensionable age. That is a huge leap. We are living in an entirely different world, structurally and socially, than we were 70 years ago.
When you look at the demographic data comparing 2013 to the projections for 2033, you can literally see the older age brackets widening out significantly. It's getting very top-heavy. Our older population is going to grow substantially over the next 40 years. And look, with this growing population comes a totally shifting healthcare landscape. For example, between 2008 and 2018 in England alone, there was over a 50% increase in people living with 3 or more long-term health conditions. Our society's infrastructure absolutely has to adapt to this new reality.
But here's the really big takeaway you need to remember. Aging in the future equals increasing diversity. The older population isn't just growing in size, it's fundamentally changing. We're looking at significant projected increases across Asian, Black, mixed, and other ethnic backgrounds by 2021 compared to just a decade prior. And hey, diversity isn't only about ethnicity. According to the Center for Aging Better, sexual orientation diversity is set to absolutely surge. Get this, there are currently 4 times more LGBTQ+ people aged 45 to 64 than there are aged 65 and over. That's a massive shift coming down the pipeline.
Because our aging population is becoming so incredibly diverse, we absolutely have to talk about this concept, intersectionality. Basically, it's the interweaving of social inequalities. We're talking about things like gender, race, ethnicity, disability, and sexuality all mixing together. It helps us understand that every single one of us is shaped by the complex interaction of these different overlapping identities.
So the crucial point here is how all these categories of difference overlap. Think about how factors like income, culture, education, sex, and geography all intersect and interlock. It's like a giant puzzle. If you try to treat older people as just one giant homogeneous group, well, your understanding is going to be fundamentally flawed. I mean, an older woman living in rural poverty is going to experience aging completely differently than a wealthy, older man living in a major city, right? Intersectionality totally challenges the whole notion of a universal aging experience. It just doesn't exist.
Okay, Section 3, the sociological lens, how society shapes the aging experience.
There's this seminal book by Irving Goffman called Stigma, and it provides a really incredible concept for understanding aging. He shows how ageist attitudes don't just exist in a vacuum. They actively create discrimination. They create stigma. And this isn't just about hurt feelings either. It leads to severe, real-world social and psychological consequences. For instance, these ageist societal structures directly contribute to increasing social isolation. A recent 2024 study by Mansfield and colleagues specifically looked at these interrelationships, examining social isolation and loneliness among older British adults before and during the COVID-19 lockdowns. It turns out, the societal environment we build literally dictates how isolated or integrated our older populations feel.
Using a sociological lens also means we need to look at time a bit differently. The sociologist M. Burry points out that aging actually involves two interconnected but completely separable aspects of time. First up, we have biographical time. This is the personal stuff, the processes, experiences, and specific events that happen during your own single lifetime. But then, second, we have historical time. This is all about the impact of cohort effects. Just think about how radically different it is to experience old age if your formative years were right after World War II versus being a millennial or Gen Z navigating the digital age. Actually, I want you to consider that for yourself right now. How does the specific historical context of your generation shape your own views and expectations of getting older? It's kind of wild to think about.
Which brings us to Section 4, Cycle versus Course, updating our models.
For a really long time, the dominant academic model was the life cycle. It basically viewed life as this deterministic series of individual biological stages. Like a uniform set of steps we all just rigidly pass through in a static, continuous cycle. But as we've been seeing, that is incredibly limiting. So, sociology emphatically replaces that old idea with the life course model. The life course model is a real game changer because it actually acknowledges variations. It argues that the stages of life aren't universally standardized by biology or chronology. Instead, they vary wildly based on the type of society you live in and those generational differences we just talked about. Basically, it completely respects human agency.
Finally, Section 5, the life course approach, a holistic framework.
According to researchers Elder Jr. and Shanahan, this life course approach operates on 5 core principles. Okay, number 1, lifespan development. This means human development is continuous. It doesn't just suddenly stop when you hit a certain arbitrary age. Number 2, agency. Sure, we might be constrained by our environment and our historical context, but we absolutely have the power to influence our own lives. 3, time. As we know, our life courses are deeply shaped by history. 4, timing. Basically, when an event happens to you really matters. An economic crash or a serious illness impacts you very differently at age 20 than it does at age 60. And finally, number 5, linked lives.
And that 5th principle is just so brilliantly illustrated by the idea of a paper chain of people holding hands. We don't experience life in a vacuum. We are all deeply, deeply connected to others, and those others influence the lives we lead. Linked lives is this constant reminder that healthy aging is heavily dependent on our social networks, our communities, and the people we surround ourselves with. Our advantages or our disadvantages literally move with us and our networks as we age.
Because human life is this complex mix of biological, psychological, and social factors, physical and mental decline are definitely not strictly inevitable. As we wrap up, I really want you to remember the relevance of everything we've covered today. The life course approach proves that healthy aging is laid out over the course of our entire lives, and our early years deeply impact our later ones. So knowing that you have agency and knowing that aging is a dynamic process shaped by the world around you, what modifiable risk factors can you mitigate in your own life right now? Think about it. Thanks so much for learning with me on this explainer. Keep questioning the paradigms around you.